Nicola Sturgeon, Scotland's First Minister, announced this week that she wants Scotland to hold another referendum on whether it should declare independence from Britain. If Sturgeon has her way, the Scots will go to the polls before spring 2019. Now, if this sounds familiar, if it feels like we've been here before, that's because we have. The Scots last voted on independence less than 3 years ago in September 2014. Joining me now is Richard Palmer, Trumpet writer and analyst, and our resident Englishman. Richard, what were your thoughts when you heard that the Scots want another vote on independence?
I was pretty cross, actually. We went through this in 2014. Nobody likes to have the very existence of their nation hang in the balance. At the time, Nicola Sturgeon, she said, well, that's the issue settled for a generation. Apparently a generation just lasts about 2.5 years. But the way you put it there actually isn't quite right. The Scots don't want another referendum. According to one poll, as Fraser Nelson quoted in the Telegraph, just 1 in 4 want another referendum at this time. So it's not even something the Scots themselves want.
So how are we in this position? How are we having a referendum when 3/4 of the country doesn't want a referendum?
I think the consensus is it's Nicola Sturgeon pursuing her own political gain. Her approval ratings are falling. This seems like a good way of putting the focus back on her and bringing them back up again. And then the Scottish National Party will probably no longer have a majority in support of a referendum after their term in office ends. And so they need to find an excuse to call another referendum before that happens.
Okay, so this is obviously a big deal. I think it's safe to say this is an existential issue for Britain. We're talking about one member of the Union declaring independence. What can we expect, or what effect will this referendum have on Britain between now and whenever it's held?
Well, firstly, it's going to be hugely divisive. I mean, it was really divisive last time around, and 1 in 4 Scots said that it permanently damaged their relationship with a friend or family member. That's just within Scotland, and then you've got all that division within the Union with the angry, anti-English rhetoric coming from Scotland, the reciprocal rhetoric coming from England, everybody slinging insults at each other. Not a pleasant experience. So you've got that division, and then you've also got just that inward focus. Britain has, since 2014, really been focused inwards on this kind of series of big referendums. It's not been playing a real leading role on the world because of that, and now that period of time is just getting extended onwards until whenever this is called, which could be all the way up until 2021 perhaps.
Now, as Scotland moves toward having another referendum, Britain is going to also be negotiating its exit from the European Union. We expect Theresa May to trigger Article 50 this week sometime, or maybe next week. Now that seems, dealing with these two massive issues seems like it's going to be really challenging.
That's right. I think the Spectator cover on the TVs behind us here really says it all. Squashed between those two challenges, because they'll be negotiating, or Britain will be negotiating, these hugely important trade deals with Europe, and there's so many different questions around the post-Brexit relationship. Then you've got Britain working with America, with India, with Australia, with all of these countries, trying to form new trade deals now, and all of those negotiations going on, and we haven't negotiated our own trade deals for decades. And then at the same time, they're dealing with this existential crisis, and Scotland will be doing its own thing with European negotiations and potentially undermining the rest of the United Kingdom. So it does really up the pressure.
Right, it's going to be a difficult time for Theresa May and her cabinet and all of her ministers. It really, just listening to you speak, I can't help contrast what you're saying with Nigel Farage and many Conservatives here in Britain, where here in Britain, there's really a consensus that everything is positive. There's really a sense of optimism and hope, and that as Britain comes out of the EU, it's going to be restored as a world power, and everything's bright and positive. But you just look at what they're going to have to negotiate. You look at the pressure that the British government will be under over the next year or two, facing another referendum in Scotland, and then trying to extricate itself from the EU. It's not going to be easy.
No, I think if you look at the rhetoric that was coming from the people that supported Brexit, I think those that are against Brexit are convinced it's already the apocalypse. But the ones that were in favour of Brexit, this was going to make Britain great again, and now we're not sure whether Britain's going to exist again.
Right, right. Thanks for your time, Richard. If you would like to read more about this subject, Richard Palmer has an article on thetrumpet.com right now, and you can follow us as we report on the referendum in Scotland and Britain's exit from the European Union at thetrumpet.com.